Hal, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show here in person on the Hard to Kill podcast. How are you doing, man?
I'm great, and I'm excited to be your first in-studio guest. You got a great setup here.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with that being said, let's get right into it. Your story is really interesting. And for folks that have heard it before on the show or elsewhere, we're going to touch on a few things that I really want to dive into because our format is conversational right now.
Mhm.
We're not across the screen. There's some interesting things about your background. And namely, I want to know more about how you went from being a gifted student in school, crushing it, essentially wanting to become a doctor, if I understand correctly, but then you pivoted and started taking on some of the hardest jobs that you could possibly take on: corrections officer, police officer, getting involved in MMA. That doesn't seem like a natural progression for a gifted kid in school. So how did that come about?
It's a big question. I'll try to give a somewhat abbreviated answer. It'll be an 8-hour podcast. I was smart, gifted, as they say, kind of labeled at my young age. But I was also always kind of a curious, sort of a seeker. I was always looking for something. I didn't find out till later in life what I was looking for. So when I started down kind of the road that had been laid in front of me, the road that I was supposed to take, that my parents, wanted me to take for good reasons, the educational one, I started down it with good intentions to follow through, maybe get into chiropractic or medicine. I was in sciences. But there was something in me that always had me looking for other things. So I dropped out of school. I took a mountaineering course in the Rockies for 3 months, hitchhiked across Canada, went to New Zealand, Australia, backpacked around. And I never knew what I was really looking for. I just knew that whatever path I was on, if at any point I realized it was the wrong path, some part of me luckily had the courage to try an alternate one. So through my 20s, I ended up doing a lot of bartending. And at some point in my late 20s, I kind of realized, bartending's fun. You can make a lot of money bartending, but it's not fulfilling and not rewarding. So that's when I started looking for some sort of traditional or some role that could bring me fulfillment as well as making good money. At the time, my cousin was a cop, and I thought, yeah, okay, there's a bit of adventurous aspects to that job, quite a bit of autonomy. You're out in your car a lot by yourself. You can make decent money. So I thought maybe I'll do that. So I got into corrections really as a stepping stone, in the sense that I knew what my end goal was to be a cop. So I got accepted into federal corrections and then eventually into policing. So the road there was kind of a meandering one. And ultimately, I think I was really looking for safety and certainty, a guaranteed income, pension benefits. I think that was what guided me towards that career more than sort of following my heart or what I thought my true calling might be. So that's why I ended up in policing.
Interesting. Was there a call to adventure that really compelled you to do those type of things? Because they're not easy jobs. One of my best friends in high school, kind of same story. Really gifted dude. Actually, all my friends in high school, crazy smart. They all went on to do amazing things. I'm catching up. I'm doing my best to catch up.
Yeah.
But being the least intelligent person in the room, I was used to. But he decided that he was going to pursue policing from a really early age. And I remember the questions we have, like, but why? You could be a physicist. You could be a scientist. You could be a doctor. You could be anything you want. But he's like, no, this is what I want to do. He had a calling to get into that type of work. And he's subsequently gone on to do some really cool things after policing. Not surprising because he's an intelligent dude.
Mm-hmm.
So is there, aside from like you realizing there was some safety, was there an adventure side of thing that really compelled you to go into policing?
Yeah, I think it was, maybe now that you're sort of saying it, it's making me reflect on it a little deeper. I think there was definitely the thought that there might be some exciting aspects to it. And I think also the other element was I wanted to make a difference and serve others, which I got from my mother, who's been wired for taking care and helping people from the moment I met her as a baby. She was taking care of me and everyone around her. And so I think serving others and making a difference was kind of hardwired into me. But I don't think I really anticipated what the price of that service could be. So I guess it was seeking adventure and looking to help and serve and make a difference. And part of the disillusionment that a lot of first responders, military get into is they get in to make a difference. And oftentimes there's this disillusionment that most of the job is showing up after the fact to document tragedy and painful situations. And we don't get to have a big impact a lot of the times in a lot of instances we're dealing with. So there's a bit of a, I think, a letdown for me there in the sense that I wasn't coming in and sort of saving the day most of the time like I thought I would be. So that was something I wrestled with in my career too.
Oh, that's really interesting. I haven't really heard it put that way, that you're not every day going out and saving the community, and it's a bit of a letdown.
Mm-hmm.
I guess there's a parallel there with the military. I think we have similar personality traits. I always want to help. That's literally what I'm doing the show for, right? And I want to teach. So that's my medium of doing that. And then you also took on MMA. Why MMA? Because MMA, again, that's a crazy thing to do. It's not like you're just doing jiu-jitsu, which you're a black belt. You're actively going into the ring and potentially getting maimed or hurt severely, but you've decided, no, I'm going to do this. Was that because policing and that culture kind of brought you to it, or were you compelled to go do something that hard and that demanding just out of your own volition?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there's a couple different aspects to the answer. So I've always considered myself an athlete from the time I was a kid. I've always liked challenges. And I took up marathon running in my 20s, did that for a bit. And then I'm always looking for something different to try in that realm. But with the policing kind of looming, as I knew that's what I wanted to do, I really thought martial arts would be good to have on my resume. That was my only motivation to get into martial arts, was I thought I kind of need that on my resume to eventually become a cop. So I was literally just joining so I could put that on my CV that I was going to go like once every couple of weeks, but I could put it on my resume. It would look good to get into policing. Yeah. And I walked into this martial arts club. At the time, it was called Total Fitness, now called Alpha MMA out of Carlton Place, one of the best clubs anywhere. And it was like a lunchtime kind of free roll session.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I was running marathons, but also really strong for my size. I thought I was a pretty gifted athlete at the time. And I remember first roll I did, bow, touch hands. I was rolling this guy named Tad Black, who runs I think a Gracie club out of Kempville now. And he was kind of sort of skinny, didn't look super strong. Looked, to be honest, like a little bit kind of nerdy. I think he was a tech guy, good guy. But from my point of view, I was like, in my head, I literally thought, okay, I'm going to go easy on this guy. How naive and
I think I have a feeling where this is going.
Yeah, you know where it's going. And within, a minute, he tapped me like 5 times, and I was breathing heavy, and he wasn't. And I was like, what is this? And so it piqued my curiosity. And then I wasn't going once every 2 weeks. I was very quickly going every class I could basically make, multiple times a week, obviously. And then I started orienting my training outside of class around sort of fitness for MMA, and stuck with it for quite a while. So initially it started out as a resume sort of tick bark, and then turned into a passion, because I didn't realize either that MMA and jiu-jitsu is a thinking man's game. I thought, just from watching UFCs, I thought it was some kind of barbaric, sort of, little did I realize it's chess with the body, which really appealed to me too. So that's how I ended up getting into MMA. And I've never fought an MMA match. I've been to tournaments, grappling tournaments, submission fighting, jiu-jitsu tournaments. And I think it was around Christmas time, 2007, my coach had said, hey, so we're going to do your first pro fight this year. You're ready, which is a big honor when your coach says something like that to you. Of course, I didn't think I was near ready. And that was kind of the plan. And then plans got changed. Started 2008, I got in my first accident on duty. So MMA sort of went out of the picture in terms of a possibility, just in terms of not taking, hit to the head.
Yeah. So you started out like with bang. I find it funny. Did you notice that after you joined policing that you really didn't need that MMA tick in the box? Like, was it something that you realized that, most of us aren't coming from a strong foundation of martial arts. Most guys apply, they want to serve, but they don't have that background. And was that something that kind of factored in later, that you realized that some of the things that you thought about yourself that you were driven to do, kind of, you mentioned it too, like you weren't serving every day. It was jiu-jitsu and like being in the MMA world. Was that just another thing that you realized, oh, it was kind of a letdown? I didn't really need to be that good or be that guy that was on the mats kind of fighting to be the next phase of myself?
Reword that for me.
So like,
I got lost in your question. I started answering it. Before you finished. My apologies.
Yeah, let me rephrase it because I've had a few too many coffees.
Me too.
Yeah.
I'm speeding ahead with the answer. I need to drop into the present moment with you here and listen to the question.
So you were policing kind of let you down in the sense that you thought you were going to be, I'm going to say saving the world, but I think we get the gist of kind of where you were at. It kind of was not quite that.
Yeah.
You become an accomplished jiu-jitsu practitioner. You start doing MMA. You're like, this is what'll get me on the force. But then you realize I didn't really have to do that either. I mean, I would have got on likely just as is. So my question is, do you feel like you do things so that it'll tick a box for something else, or were you intrinsically doing it for yourself to be a better human being?
Yeah, initially the MMA with the jiu-jitsu with Peter Tremblay, there was it was to tick a box, and then it became something else. It became more important than policing at different points. So I was more passionate about it. I think this speaks to a broader point, which I think is an important one, which is when we bring expectations into any situation, we're setting ourselves up for the potential to be disillusioned. So if I have an expectation or a belief how something should be, in other words, that's a demand that my mind has, when it comes up shy of it, I'm going to be disillusioned. Now, disillusionment, it sounds like a derogatory or negative term, and it feels that way when you are disillusioned by a career or a support system in a career or something else. But it literally is, there's nothing more positive than disillusionment, because it literally means disillusionment. It means the freeing from illusion, which is never a bad thing. Unfortunately, when we do realize the truth of things, sometimes the most important truths are the most painful ones to accept. And it's the art form of life is learning to accept reality as it is when the world tries to tell you what the truth is. It's when we resist it that we run into all kinds of problems and end up angry, resentful, and frustrated. There's a little point to bring up there. This could be the rest of the podcast.
When you said disillusionment and how it's actually positive because you're removing illusion, the first thing I thought of was, oh, that's kind of like being delusional. And the connotation of delusional is negative. Usually it's like, dude, you're delusional.
Right.
But in the same vein, you kind of have to be a little delusional, especially in your case. And I want to touch on that. You're creating something really interesting in the psychology space. And you're working with first responders. I don't know many that actually do what you do. There likely are, but I don't know them. And that being said, you've embarked on working with first responders and military folks because, from what I can understand, the system isn't really fit us in a sense. Maybe you can clarify that, but where essentially is it failing, and where is that kind of illusion? How is it hurting the community so that we can actually progress and heal? And where do you fit in now with that whole ecosystem?
Yeah. So if the question is related to how is recovery for first responders and military and psychotherapy element of it specific, how is it failing that community? Again, this is going to be a bit of a guess because I'm somewhat limited to my practice and some of my colleagues, but I also hear stories and anecdotal evidence from clients that have come from other places in therapy. And this by no means is a attack or a critique of other therapists. But I think in our practice, what we provide, which is a bit of a perhaps unique from most, is we put a heavy emphasis on the physiology and the the biology of our clients. So I'm in conversations with my clients a lot, first responders and military in particular, about things like things that you would think would fall outside the scope of discussion in psychotherapy, but diet, exercise, stretching, the use of things like heat exposure, like sauna, cold exposure, fasting, things like that. And so, that brings the question: what the hell does that have to do with psychology? And our approach is basically, or my approach is that um, the brain, sits on top of your body. It's part of the body, and the mind, the part that's working against us, if we're suffering with anxiety or depression or stress disorders, is within the brain. So the first thing you need to do is get a really healthy brain and body so that you can use this sharp instrument known as our mind in with clarity and with intention. If we're dysregulated physiologically in terms of hormones, blood sugar, just overall energy and fitness, then our brain is not going to be healthy.
Mm.
So now we're trying to operate a very sharp instrument, which is the mind, with an unsteady, unhealthy platform. Right away, you're handicapping yourself. So whereas once we get this system running appropriately, peacefully, and in a balanced way, then when you give people psychological tools and strategies for how to use their mind in a way that's constructive, not destructive, they have a much easier, at least chance of operating from that way.
Mm. I'm guessing you didn't come to this realization by chance or from reading books.
Mm-hmm.
This is lived experience for you.
Yeah.
So you just said that you didn't get to do your pro fight because that's where you got injured. So what happened?
Yeah. So, well, interestingly, January 1st, 2008, I was living sort of health and fitness as one of the main preoccupations or focuses, values of my life. I was running marathons. I was doing jiu-jitsu, basically 5, 7 days a week, full time, basically. I was in great shape physically, and then I got in a car accident at work. It was a rear end collision in my cruiser, suffer what was diagnosed as a mild traumatic brain injury. Mild.
Miles.
Yeah. It's like a mild divorce.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mild bankruptcy.
Yeah.
And I was diagnosed with PTSD. And because of that injury, I stopped exercising, stopped eating well, started drinking, put on 40 pounds, and went from kind of a high level, sort of what I would consider, pretty elite athlete, to overweight and out of shape. And so I became the biggest problem in my own life. Life can be, as we all know, life can be very challenging. The problem is a lot of us, of all the challenges we're dealing with, of all the problems we're facing, we end up becoming the biggest problem in our own lives. And I did that through a period of drinking, overeating, inactivity. Now, I don't take 100% of the blame for that. I mean, there was a brain injury, but I went from athlete to non-athlete, and I think which only exacerbated and prolonged my recovery process. So that's what kind of started me on this journey of self-learning and trying to figure out how to fix myself, essentially.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did it get dark?
Yeah. There's a pause there. It's like I went there in my head for a second. Yeah. Yeah. I haven't put myself back there in quite a while in the way I just did. Yeah, it was 2000. This is a long time ago now. I mean, it was 18 years ago. But in 2008, 2009, I went from sort of a high flying individual, both career, family, so blessed, amazing. A wife and 3 kids, another one on the way, and just so blessed to being suicidal, and really, I can remember a couple times when I was able to drive again. I got a motorcycle. It was risk taking, trying to feel alive, and I can remember just going on the side of the pavement, right along the gravel, right on the edge, as fast as that little bike would go, and just screaming in my helmet because I wanted to, veer off. And yeah, so dark. I mean, I think maybe as dark as I could ever get to without actually plunging myself into the permanent darkness. Yeah.
What turned it around?
Well, I mean, I've shared this story before, but I'll pinpoint it to one thing, but it's one thing that's symbolic of an umbrella of things in terms of family and connection that saved me. But the one thing was my wife was trying to explain to my little boy at the time, and he was just a little guy, why I wasn't the same dad that I'd been, months earlier. Why I wasn't tucking him in at night, and why I wasn't reading him stories, why I wasn't playing with him. And he was of an age where he really probably couldn't process exactly what she meant by he's not the same daddy. But the way he processed it was he looked at me and said, I want my real dad to come home. And so in that instance, and that was symbolic of what was happening with all my kids and family. But at that moment, it made me realize that I was not suffering on a desert island by myself. And if I was alone on a desert island, I could choose to suffer and choose to not put in the work to recovery and choose to indulge in alcohol and overeating and hiding from life. But when I realized in that moment that I was part of a social fabric that was impacting negatively everyone around me, especially those I loved, I decided that I no longer had the right to not put in the work. And so I put the work in, got back in shape, and I was off work for, I think, about 20 months altogether. And I got back to full duties then as an officer. Yeah.
That's a powerful why, right?
Yeah.
In terms of support, family clearly got your back. Was there an institutional level of support that was able to help you stabilize and get back on your feet?
No. I don't know if it could have been there at that time. So I don't want to blame any agency or organization for not being there. I wasn't looking for that. My wife, who's my biggest support, and my kids. That's all I needed at that point. And I have a few close friends also that I could rely on. But it was like anything else. If you'd asked me before that had happened with my son, why I wasn't getting better, I would have told you all the how-to problems I was running into. I would have said, I don't have this in my life. I don't have this support, or I don't have this doctor. I would have pointed to, I just don't know how to. But the reality, the broader point in life is when you have a big enough why to, you can always figure out the how.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as I clearly found the motivation, or from the root motive, reason why, which was I'm hurting my family, I quickly figured out the how to. And I did it with very little external support. I mean, there's clinicians that were helping me, a few back then, but not ones who I really connected with very well. It was more just I made the decision from the root side, which means kill. In other words, the option to stay sick was dead to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I did what it took to get back.
A lot of folks that would be in your same scenario might not have the same end result, which is you're successful, you kicked your addictions, your family's intact. You had that moment where you realize I need to change, and you did. But what makes you different? Why did you actually listen and actually make the fundamental changes? I think that's an important thing for folks to hear.
Wow. That's a big question.
It's the point of the show, buddy.
Yeah. So if I'm hearing you then, so what's at the crux or nexus
Yes.
between someone who recovers and someone doesn't?
Yes.
What do you think?
Well, I know from my experience, faith is a powerful motivator. I believed that I'd be better. And then not allowing myself, a future version of myself, to fail. I saw it as failure. People might see it differently, but I knew I had a legacy to carry on, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I had children. So it made, similar to yours, the why tangible. I could see it. I'm not letting my kids down.
Yeah.
And faith. Returning to my faith helps substantially. And probably being stubbornly Irish probably helped a lot too, minus the boozing.
Yeah.
So that would be it.
Yeah. And so if we're to try to figure out what the main point is for most people, I think you've touched on a few things. And I think if people don't have any support system or family, I think that can be problematic, right? It's like if they're out there alone, the logo for our business for Hughes Counseling is one of the images in it. It's of a wolf's head, and we chose that as part of the logo. It's symbolic and it's a reminder. Um, wolves are the number one pack animal. We're number two, I think, on the planet in terms of how our ability to collaborate. That's our superpower. All the other animals have better vision, hearing, sight, strength. We suck compared to animals in almost every facet physically, but our superpower is our ability to collaborate and use the front parts of our brain to team up and problem solve and bear burdens with 4 shoulders instead of 2, for example. So I think when an individual is trying to recover from an injury, whether it be a military veteran or first responder, if they're doing it in isolation, lone wolves suffer and invariably die. And I think when you see a lot of unfortunately, the suicides that go on, I suspect that's a big contributing factor. I mean, life's, pardon my language, fucking tough.
Hmm.
But to do it alone, for a lot of guys and gals, it feels insurmountable. And you start looking for the exit door when you're doing it alone. So I think that's a big factor in determining recovery is if somebody can find a support system. Even sometimes it's one person can make all the difference in the world to someone. One person where they feel heard and understood can be enough to hold on long enough to start to put the work in for that recovery.
You talk about recovery a lot in your content, right? The implication of recovery, though, is like you're kind of returning back to who you were when you were stable. But you teach something a little bit different. Can you get into that and the distinction between like recovery and how you can still progress after you've recovered, even though you're stable? What does that mean? And like, why does it really matter?
The strongest hearts and minds have the most scars. I can remember when I sort of became part of the medical model for bipolar and PTSD, and a head injury after my second accident. It was very much focused around minimizing symptoms. I was told that those conditions I was diagnosed with were chronic and I'd be medicated across my lifetime on them. And there was never any mention of sort of full recovery or getting back to normal, let alone, post-traumatic growth or the cultivation of more resiliency as a result of having gone through things. Like resiliency, when you look at it from a material sort of physics point of view, the idea is that if you drop a plastic cup on the ground, if it's resilient, when you pick it back up, it may have folded in a little bit upon the impact and the force on it, but then it's resilient. So it returns back, bounces back to its original state. That's resiliency 1.0. Resiliency 2.0, there's examples of it all around us, but perhaps the simplest example would be when you go to the gym. So you put stress and pressure on your muscles of the gym, and they don't, after stress and perhaps some micro tears, whatever goes on there at a cellular level, they don't return back to where we were before the stress, before the weight that was put on. They return back larger, stronger, and more resilient. And so my approach with clients and on my own journey, the goal was never to go through all of this struggle, physical and mental, to get back to where I was before. The universe in some way, shape, or form has given me the message that how I was before was in some way, shape, or form insufficient to be able to withstand what I went through. And so to only get back to that state after going through all of that seemed to me to be not enough. So this is where we get into conversations about the hero's journey.
Mm-hmm.
In the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell's work, he identified the storyline that's part of almost every movie and book that's ever been written. And I think it's important when speaking to post-traumatic growth. So basically, you're in the everyday world, and then there's some call to adventure or action. Could be you decide to join the military, or be a cop, or take on some challenge. And when you answer the call to action, you're invariably now going out of your known comfort zone or world into the unknown, and you're going to face challenges. And like in every movie, whether it's Star Wars or Superman, eventually you have to face some enemies, some fears, some demons. And in every storyline, as in uh, a lot of people who are working through the recovery now, they end up in what's called the dark night of the abyss, which is essentially the point in any movie storyline where you're not sure if you're going to make it. For me, it might have been, those times on my bike on the side of the pavement and gravel, and you're not sure if you're going to make it. And then somehow you summon up the resources, you learn new skills, you develop new strengths you didn't know you had. You find allies and friends along the way. And eventually, with their help and through your new uh, level of resiliency and wisdom, you climb up out and you come back to the ordinary world. You are not the same as you were before. You've found new treasures. You've unlocked new strengths and wisdoms you didn't know you had before, and you have more friends. And this is when the most important part of the journey occurs. And this is what you're doing, Dave, is it's not over then. You've returned to your community. You've returned with treasure. And now it's your job to share it with the community that you're a part of. I mean, this is what you're doing with the veteran community.
Thank you. I guess you're right. And a lot of it is, I say by accident, but I am coming around to the idea that nothing is by chance and nothing is by accident. Very much in line with like Jungian kind of principles, synchronicities. Too many things start lining up that make me realize, that's interesting. We're having this conversation just at breakfast, but what I would be doing if I wasn't doing this, and what do I intend to do? And I was having that kind of aha moment a few weeks ago when I was in Washington, D.C., in the Senate. How could I have ever imagined this if I was still keeping small and I hadn't gone through the shit of recovery and figuring it out? And you made it's actually in the chapter of my book that you're featured in, Harden to Fuck Up, where I use the analogy, and I love it. And if you could go over it for the folks that haven't heard it before, of the bamboo and how it's got to be in the shit. And then you see there's just a tremendous amount of growth. I think that encapsulates what we're talking about here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great, I can't remember where I first heard that, but essentially, and the details aren't, the message is the main thing. If I get any details specific to this particular plant wrong, so the Chinese bamboo tree is a really hard nut. So when you plant it in the soil and give it a certain amount of water, sunlight, you tend to it. And if you provide the perfect environment for growth, after the first year, it doesn't break through the soil. So it's down there in the dark. It's down there in the fertilizer, in the dirt, in the muck. It hasn't seen the light of day. And if you take good care of it again, after 2 years, it doesn't break through. So this goes on after 5 years of being in the dark. Finally, this nut cracks and it breaks the surface. And then it grows 90 feet in 6 weeks. It's literally the only plant on the planet where you can sit. And if you sit in a group of bamboo trees that are growing, you can literally hear the stretching and the cracking because it's happening in real time, the growth. And so there's an obvious metaphor here for growth post trauma, post depression, post PTSD, post difficulty, in that at some point, there has to be a hinge point for each person where they're just kind of sick and tired of being sick and tired of being there in the darkness, where some motivation or some reason why has to be enough to crack that nut. And the point between a real decision on recovery and how long it's going to take, that timeline can be relatively short compared to the timeline you were stuck feeling like there was no way out of the darkness. But once that decision and the right resources and people are acquired, that timeline can be relative. I know for me, and I'm not saying this is always the case, but it was literally months from darkness to getting off all of the meds that they had me on, to public speaking, to going back to school and reclaiming my life. But the time I was in the dark was like the bamboo tree. It was years.
Mm. Yeah, I love that analogy. That's why I had to share it in the book, and I had to have you retell it, because I think that's often where veterans, police officers can get stuck, because their timeline for change isn't realistic. And what you're building in Smith Falls right now is really cool. And in terms of like when you see a veteran or you see a first responder come through your door, what are some of the initial mistakes that veterans make when they start their recovery process and start talking to a psychotherapist? What do you see as kind of like the generalized kind of areas of concern for a lot of the folks and a lot of the mistakes that they're making when it comes to like their mindset and how they're actually going to start to recover?
Yeah, it's an important question. And first and foremost, if I ever suggest, certain things related to recovery and I make it sound like it's simple or easy, I don't want to offend any of your listeners. I've done the job. I know how hard it is. I know the impacts. I know how hard it is to recover. So
Mm-hmm.
let me just put that out there. I have nothing but respect for our first responders and military. Now, having said that, um, there's a big difference between being an academic and a spectator when it comes to being in recovery or anything in life. There's a big difference between being a dabbler and being heavily invested. And I think these two things are really important when it comes to what's holding back or slowing the recovery process for first responders, military, for anybody really that comes in my clinic. So um, when I say academic versus spectator, more broadly speaking, in our culture right now, there's a lot of people that are spectators to information. An example of that would be you listen to a Joe Rogan podcast and someone's talking about heat exposure in sauna. You listen to it one time and then you think you know something really concrete about saunas, and now you have a really strong belief about it. You've just spectated something for 5 minutes. You haven't done any investigation yourself, and you think you know something. That's a very superficial spectating level of understanding of something. An academic approach with that specific example would be you hear something on Joe Rogan, it's from Rhonda Patrick or Huberman or one of these people that are, experts in some of these fields. You hear it, you listen to it a couple times, then you go on PubMed and you research all the journals they've been referring to, plus your own research. Then you buy a book on someone from Finland who's been doing the research on it. Then you investigate it further. Now you're an academic. Now you don't just have information, you're starting to turn it to wisdom. Then you actually do the thing. Now it really is wisdom because you've activated it through what you've changed. So it's the same thing in recovery. So I'll often encourage my clients when they first come in, like if we're just going to talk 50 minutes a week, once a week, there's 167 and 10 minutes of hours the rest of the week where you're not with me. If you just sit there and listen to me one time and don't take notes and don't review them when you leave, and don't read additional books and don't watch YouTube videos and don't invest in your recovery, the chances of you moving the needle on feeling better is very slim. And that's a spectator approach to recovery. You're just showing up and passively engaging in recovery. Whereas if you take notes, research things, read your own books, look up your own videos, really get invested in your recovery, you can move the needle a lot quicker, which is the difference between dabbling and being invested. So you don't want to dabble in recovery. If you treat recovery, let's say someone gets injured and they're off work with a mental health injury, and they treat it almost like a part-time or a full-time job, their recovery, versus 50 minutes a week with a therapist, 50 minutes for massage therapy, 30 minutes with their OT, where they're just kind of dabbling and just sort of spectating their own journey versus being invested. When I made my recovery, it's because I decided I wasn't going to do it anymore. I wasn't going to be sick anymore. And I treated it like a full-time job. That's why the bamboo 90 feet in 6 weeks. You can't dabble and expect, a quick and thorough recovery. You got to be invested, which is hard to do when you're sick. I get that too.
Yeah. So it would be safe to say, like, manage your expectations, especially if this is your first step in recovery, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I like your model is because it takes a holistic approach, because most recovery, and I'm talking from a military perspective because that's what I know,
Mm-hmm.
it's really focused on psychological recovery, right? But one thing you said on another show that we did was, I haven't met or haven't worked with anybody that got better that didn't take care of their physical health first. Could you get into that a little bit more?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's why you and I have kind of gravitated towards each other,
Hell yeah.
is that we have similar perspectives, and you're filling a gap that I've perceived for a long time in this community when it comes to recovery, which is the health part. The way I look at it, more broadly speaking, is, we have a psychological system and we have a physiological system. And so if we're trying to, when I have a client come in my clinic, for example, and let's say they've struggled with their weight, so they're overweight and that they haven't been active. Maybe they're pre-diabetic, maybe they're drinking, not feeding themselves very well, all these sorts of things. So physiologically, they're going to have very little peace and balance within their system. Now, when you are driving a 92 Toyota Corolla, it doesn't matter how many F1 level driving skills you give the person, they're still going to end up in the fucking ditch. And I use that metaphor with my clients. It's that if you're operating that kind of vehicle that is out of balance and alignment and is not being run the right way, and there are right and wrong ways, definitively now we know how to run this system. And then I'm trying to give you strategies and tools with how to use your mind, but the mind is housed within a unfit, unbalanced brain and body. I guess it's possible. There are exceptions to this rule. Someone like Stephen Hawking would be an extreme example of able to use a psychology in a tremendous way with almost no physiology in terms of me. But for the most part, best of luck. It's very challenging. So my approach is particularly paying a lot of attention, a lot of discussion around running your physiological system in a way where you have peace and balance, which is the basic platform we require, so that you then can hear, understand, and have clarity of mind to be able to implement a new way of running this system, which is just as important.
Exhaust the body, calm the mind type approach.
Mm-hmm.
The analogy you just used made me laugh. You have like a 92 Corolla. Yeah, that hits. Okay, what about it if you take it and you look at it from the opposite point of view? You have, let's say, a Ferrari. You got your fitness dialed in.
Yeah.
Can it work in a way where you feel, because you're fit, because you're healthy, that, look, I can get through this mental health stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be an issue. I'm fit. I'm healthy. And it'll cause a deeper descent into darkness because of I'm not going to say cockiness, but your confidence in your physical abilities. Have you seen that?
Yeah. And I think you used the right word. That would be confidence. And confidence without clarity leads to destruction. Confidence is, in my opinion, hugely overrated. So to illustrate that point, let's imagine you and I are downtown Montreal. Let's say it's Monday morning, 8:30. I'm assuming Montreal downtown's pretty crazy. Monday morning, 8:30. We're down there and we're at the crosswalk and we're trying to get across. We're waiting for the walk sign to turn on. And there's traffic in every direction. It's I'm assuming pretty mayhemic, if that's a word. If I could be so bold as to try to use it.
It is now.
Okay.
It is now.
Full of mayhem. So we're standing outside. The thing indicates we can walk. In that moment, with everything going on, do we want confidence or do we want clarity?
Well, I want clarity to know there's not a car racing through the stop sign or the stoplight.
Yeah.
I'm going to look both ways. And
so you want clarity?
I want clarity. Yeah.
Yeah. Confidence is overrated. Confidence comes from the platform of, I know, and I know for sure, which it seems ironic or dichotomous, I'm sure, but that is one of the weakest platforms we can come from in life in general. Because when we are certain about our beliefs and certain with what we know, we have limited the opportunity to take in new information. There's two types of people in life. There's people that want to know more, and there's people that want to defend what they already know. So I'll take clarity over confidence every day. So you bring that athlete into the clinic like you described, and he's very confident and feeling very great. I know what I need, what I don't need. Where's his opportunity for learning? Where's his curiosity? Where's his openness and flexibility into taking on new concepts or new strategies for using this tool? It's limited. The most powerful position we can be in life is, I'm not sure. I don't know.
So it sounds like that can really be a struggle between your ego that will essentially hold you back from potentially getting to that next phase in who you need to be, because you've established something that is healthy and fit. You've established that you're a healthy person. So then that would be contrary to your identity. Oh, I have this mental health thing. Yeah, but it can't be that bad. I'm a healthy person. And so that confidence is now, that seems like more of an ego thing. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, I think ego, and I think it's a reflection of rigidity. Again, this is a little bit outside your question, but I think it's an important thing maybe to bring up is um, there's a lot of stuff going on right now in our culture where people are defending their beliefs, the things they're confident and certain about online and everywhere else. But they're defending them in the way where if I have a different idea than you, then you get offended like your idea was you, not just something you'd gathered. So like your beliefs and your ideas about things, whether it's mental health or VAC or whatever, they can be yours, but they're not you.
Mm-hmm.
Like that chair, I'm assuming is yours,
It is.
but it's not you. So the things we gather, we tend to over-identify with as us. And so we defend them like they are us. So when we get defensive about things we've gathered like beliefs, we're therefore going to limit our opportunity to take on new ones or let go of those ones. This is the problem with the human mind. We've over-identified with it. We think it's us up there in our head talking. And it's the only part of our system that works against us. Our lungs always try to work in alignment. Our heart, our muscles, that one little part of our brain we call the mind, the thinking mind, is the only part of us that ever almost acts like it's intentionally trying to fuck us up. Stress, anxiety, depression, not being disciplined, eating really pleasurable things that hurt us, alcohol, drugs. It's the over-identification with that part of ourselves that leads to a lot of our problems. I would argue. I could be wrong. I don't know for sure.
And that could be the only thing that actually gets us closer to being like a light being of pure consciousness, right?
Yeah.
You have to forcefully identify the things and struggle through them.
Yeah.
Because like that's like Stoic philosophy, right?
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Yeah. I mean, a life without struggle is probably not a life worth living, right? Like how empty would that be if you didn't have a struggle? I mean, the frame shift for me was really when I learned that this isn't happening to me, it's happening for me.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, there's nothing more powerful than just repeating that to yourself. Like I am being built, you mentioned resiliency. I am becoming more resilient. This will only make me stronger. And I feel a lot of times when you're in your darkest of days, you're like, this can't be making me better. This is awful. How could I ever recover from this? This is not fair. So for somebody who's kind of in that state, that's unable to see the next phase, like how do you convey that message? Like, dude, this is like the most important gift you've been given. And, I pray. And if I pray for strength, I recognize God isn't just going to give me strength. He's going to test me to make me stronger. How do you convey that to somebody that just can't see it?
Yeah, it's very challenging.
I bet.
Yeah, you get somebody who is coming to you who's in a really bad place, and you tell them you're really lucky you're going through this. You might get punched in the face. I mean, that's and you might deserve it.
Yeah, I would have tried to punch you, but yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And that speaks to when you are working with people, you got to meet them with where they're at. You don't come in with a philosophy like that with somebody who's in the dark night of the soul or the dark abyss, like I spoke of, but the hero's journey. Because the reality is when someone is in acute level of suffering and pain, psychological or physical, you do need to help them stabilize and regain peace and balance in their system for them to have any clarity to begin to talk philosophically with regards to struggle being the pathway to growth. So I think it's slowly and incrementally you move people towards that, but you got to get them stabilized physically and psychologically first. I mean, it's inarguable that I don't know if you've ever seen and by the way, I should have said this at the beginning. If I happen to say anything that any of your listeners find wise or useful, none of it's Hal Hughes' original material. I've read it, I've heard it, I've quoted it. Some of it I've learned on my own through experience, but then Googled it, and it's something a Stoic came up with. So I'm not a guru or a wise man in that sense. So I believe it was a psychologist named Stutz, and he was talking about this idea of struggle and pain. And basically, he did this little cartoon around it, which is really powerful. And basically, it shows a little stick figure within a bubble that he calls the comfort zone. And so in the comfort zone, there's a lot of certainty, a lot of safety, a lot of predictability. And anytime that you venture outside of that bubble, the comfort zone, you're immediately going to run into this wall, which he calls pain. But pain can be, it can be actual pain, it can be fear, it can be inconvenience, it could be novelty, but you're going to bump into that pain wall. And so what most people do is as soon as they bump into that, they go back into their comfort zone thinking they're keeping themselves safe when all they're doing is keeping their fucking lives small. Now, on the other side of that wall, when you're willing to embrace uncertainty, vulnerability, fear, risk, all these things, pain, on the other side of that wall is a world of endless possibilities. So at every turn in the road, we're met with this decision. Am I going to embrace uncertainty, risk, difficulty in order to have more possibilities in my life? Or am I going to stay within the comfort zone? And one of these decisions is in alignment with how we are meant to be as mammals, as biological beings, and one is out of alignment. And when I say that, if you think about the first 10, 15 or so years of your life, were you wired for safety and certainty, or were you wired for adventure and movement and curiosity and expansion?
Yeah, everything is about learning. It's just
And then,
everything's new.
and then what happens to us? Life happens. Yeah. We get ideas around safety and certainty from our parents, well intended, traumas, thing happened to us. And then the idea of, by the time we're in our 30s, it's like, we've shrunk down our dreams and goals. We've trimmed our life. And by the time we get into our 40s, the goal is just to get to the pension, to, maintain the benefits and just not get into any trouble. That's the goal. And that's when we start getting into fucking trouble, is when your main goal is safety and certainty. You're going to run into all kinds of problems in life. Stress, anxiety, depression, purposelessness. So when you realize that, if you're lucky enough to wake up to that fact, then you realize, okay, I either embrace uncertainty and change, or I'm going to suffer. So I can stay in the cave trying to keep things safe and certain, or I can draw the sword and go out and try to slay some dragons. Because even in the cave, if I hide in here, they find me anyways. But they're not in the form of adventure and maybe failing and taking chances at life. They're in the form of depression and loneliness and meaninglessness in life.
I don't know where I heard this. I listen and read a lot, but it was something to the effect of create your own problems or your mind will create the problems for you. So if you're not outwardly doing stuff that can create some struggle, your mind will do that for you. And now you're solving something that's not even tangible. And thankfully, I don't really suffer from anxiety. I think that was just my upbringing. I don't really worry about the future per se. But that being said, it's not that I don't have my worries. But one thing is that I don't ruminate, and I do a lot. And I think that was part of my coping mechanism to start. I overwhelmed myself with work. I took on a master's degree. I had 2 kids. We moved. I started a new career. I was coaching 2 teams, just more and more and more. Is that a pattern that typically takes hold of folks in like the first responder world to kind of mask their need for change? Because I felt I was changing, but effectively I was just staying within the same context of what I was used to, teaching, education, but just piling on more. So I didn't have to deal with the things that were kind of truly at play, which was, why am I doing any of this?
So it's almost like the activity was an avoidance of what you really need to do or what you were scared to do.
100% it was. Yep.
Yeah. There's some interesting research. I haven't looked at it, so I'm not going to quote it, but around this concept. You ever done this where, let's say, there's a pile of papers on the stack of your desk that you've been avoiding? might be.
Yeah.
It's there right now, isn't it?
No, it's literally right over there. I hit
Yeah,
it, but
yeah.
it's over there.
So it might be, it might be taxes or some kind of bookkeeping, or it
Yeah.
might be some forms for the government. You have to, I don't know what it is, but it's something, and it might as well be a fire breathing dragon. You're just avoiding it. Yeah. So rather than do it, what we do is we do a tertiary, non-related task like, I've cleaned the whole fucking house or cleaned the whole office, rather than doing that. So it's almost like I'm soothing my mind's realization of what I should be doing, which is what I'm fearing. I'm soothing it by being active and productive in some other way that's irrelevant. So this, I think most of your listeners will probably resonate that they've done that in their lives. So there's an interesting strategy which seems nonsensical, but if you do an incredibly hard task, so I'll give you an actual real life example, and I do this. So I've got stacks of papers or things like that in my life I'm avoiding, and so what I'll do is I'll go sit in the ice bath in my garage for 5 minutes. And then once you do that and you get that big dopaminergic activation, facing the stack of papers is easier. So sometimes doing a much harder task can create the physiology within your neurochemistry within your system that you will move towards the task that you've been avoiding. But yes, this being productive but not engaging in what you're fearful of is almost like the way you put a bomb on your mind, that part of yourself that knows you're not moving towards the thing you need. And it speaks to a larger point too, which is you always want to face dragons when they're babies. So I've tried to in my own life, and I'm not perfect at it. I'm not even sure if I'm good at it yet. I've tried to, once I'm realized I'm scared of something, to as quickly as I can, some of my resources move towards it, because the longer you let that dragon grow and grow up, it goes from being a baby dragon with no fire and no claws to talons and fire breathing. So one of the secrets to life and managing fears is the second you recognize you're scared of something, slowly and incrementally inch towards it.
I think that's a good analogy for how I met my wife. I was petrified of her. She was my waitress, and I kept on going. I went for months, dude, before I even got the courage to ask her.
Yeah.
So yeah, good analogy. Thanks for that. And the reason why I brought up that whole idea of burying yourself in work is because I know I was guilty of it. I have to catch myself when I do it now, but I notice it a lot in the community, especially the high octane guys. I can see that this is a pattern that repeats itself in our community. Mm-hmm. It's easy to bury yourself in work and not actually do the work on yourself so that you can do all that stuff later. I have a question for you in terms of the whole system we're talking about here. If you were to be able to design a system for first responders, veterans, that would be more conducive to them actually recovering, because what you're doing now is obviously contained in a system, and you're doing a great job at it. But what do you think some of the changes should be or could be to make it more optimized? It's not going to be perfect, but in your mind, what would be the ideal solution to that?
Yeah, that's another really good, and that's a big question. So I'll give them a condensed answer as best I can. I think immersive type programs are important. So what I mean by that is, again, you go back to the spectating versus academic, the dabbling versus being full-time in terms of recovery from anything. So when you provide an immersive program, let's say like a retreat, I volunteer with First Responders United, which Dr. Edward Murray put together, which is an amazing volunteer program where we do 5-day retreats. And so you're immersed in it for 5 days. It's residential. So you are no longer dabbling in recovery. It's not like you have every couple of weeks a psychotherapist or an OT, or it's you're there for 5 days. You're immersed not only in the programming and the content that can help people, but more importantly than the content, way more, you're immersed in a community of like-minded, like-experienced, with the same intention of recovery, people around you. And our job at those retreats, from my humble perspective, is I know there's nothing magical I'm going to provide in terms of content or strategies that's going to change those men's lives, or in the women's retreats, their lives. My job is to create a space where they can come together and coalesce and start to provide a community focused around recovery. That's my job. And so I think if I could wave a magic wand for recovery programs for first years on military, it would be immersive type programs where you can help the clients get some momentum in their recovery and get really invested and create peer groups where they can support each other beyond the 5 days or the week or whatever it is. So now you no longer have these lone wolves sort of dabbling and unsure about their recovery. They're invested and they're not alone. And they have a common language from the retreat to speak about meditation and different cognitive distortions, et cetera, et cetera. So that would be like my first thought of that big question would be that.
Sounds like we're going back to the days of old where you'd go back to your village and you'd hang out and you'd talk about stuff and you'd process the awful stuff that you had to do because you had to go to war or people in your village, whatever the trauma may be. It seems like that is the natural way to heal as a community, right? The more and more I look at it, the more and more I realize being isolated is the single worst thing that could ever happen. And then going to individual providers is great, but until you actually form that unit, and that's why military has a unit, police has a unit, it seems to be prophylactic to long-term harm but if you do get harmed, it should serve as the way to actually figure out how to get better. That's my philosophy on it. But is that shown in the research? Is that basically what we're trying to get at here? Is that we need to have more community connection if we want to actually see a community get healthier and back on their feet?
So I have the privilege and honor of trying to support a lot of people that struggle with addiction. And what I've learned is that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. The opposite of post-traumatic stress disorder is not a return back to how they were before. The opposite of post-traumatic stress disorder lies in community. And so if we're looking for solutions to these problems and we're only focused on the individual and we're not creating community around them, the most successful treatment for alcoholics, for example, and people that are addicted to narcotics. I'm not going to give you the name of a rehab program or a hospital or a clinician that's got some miracle drug. The most successful program is called AA. And ironically, there's no clinicians in there unless they're an addict suffering too, and they're not coming in to give a guest presentation. Isn't that an amazing fact? That the most successful programs for narcotics and alcohol don't actually have any clinicians involved. It's about community and people that are struggling, helping other people that are struggling, people that have walked the path of sobriety, looking back further on the path, someone on their journey and showing them the way out.
Yeah. I mean, when I reflect, I realize I'm incredibly blessed with my community, which I never really lost. I just got a really close network of friends. And especially for men, the statistics are awful. Most men our age or in our age bracket, they don't have any friends. And it's really troubling. And I look at myself and I go, oh, no, I've got at least 10 that I can text right now. And we hang out regularly. And I realize, oh my God, that's not the norm. And so I really cultivate that as much as possible. And it seems like what you're talking about here too is more on the same lines. Like if you don't build your community with the help of other people, the recovery process is going to be that much harder. And it seems like it's just going to take that much more effort, which can be resolved if you find that community. And it doesn't have to be veterans. It doesn't have to be military, if I understand correctly. Just a community of human beings that you can actually enjoy their time with. Is that right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's because I think more than just for the recovery, but even for if we back up a step, if we look at not causation, but if we look at the context with which someone develops a mental illness or acquires PTSD, it's when it comes to trauma in particular, the context with which we endure the trauma is predictive of whether someone suffers later on to the extent which they suffer. So when you look at some of those cultures, from what we can glean from the historical records, the anthropological records, those warrior cultures, who were celebrated, Spartans, different
Yeah.
ones across time, it certainly looks like there doesn't seem to be a lot of mentioning of PTSD, like, anecdotes, because after war, after witnessing, their fellow tribespeople, warriors being killed, after having to kill people and bearing witness to atrocities, when they came back, their community literally encircled them by fire, usually under the moonlight in a ceremony. They're allowed to scream, they're allowed to cheer, they're allowed to cry, they're allowed to talk about whatever they'd seen, while the community celebrated. Uh, in those types of environments, the experience of trauma often doesn't translate to mental illness afterwards. Now, you juxtapose that with, post-Vietnam situations, for some of the warriors in more recent battles where they're unsure after the fact what the war was even about, and they were criticized when they came home. Something, fortunately, some of our warriors have experienced. Within that context, there's a confusion and a moral injury that occurs,
Yes.
and then you see a lot higher rates of depression and PTSD.
Yeah. I'm glad you touched on that in terms of coming together, especially as a community. Have you read The Odyssey?
No.
I just finished it. Freaking incredible, because the movie's coming out this
Okay.
July. I'm a huge Greek history and Roman history nerd, so I was like, man, I really got to read this thing. Throughout the book, now it's Odysseus, so he fought in Troy, and he's lost for like 20 years in the Aegean, in the Mediterranean, and he has to go through all these trials and tribulations, and he's fighting with his men, and he's losing men consistently, but like a through line through it is they're always weeping. And I don't know if this was a Greek thing specifically culturally. I don't know if the Romans were the same, but it didn't seem like this was out of the norm. They'd be at a banquet and they'd be recounting their war stories and they'd be weeping together. I'm like, oh, they're shedding the stress.
Yeah.
They're not talking about post-traumatic stress. Yes, bad things happen. They lost friends, they lost comrades, they lost family, but they're sharing this burden together. Their guests are weeping with them. And that really stuck with me from the book, because I wasn't expecting that in this type of story. But to touch back on kind of like, how do we get past like where we're at now? And you were talking about this really hit home, not being recognized, essentially, like the moral injury that occurs when you go fight a war. I was bought in, man. I was doing Canada's dirty work and I couldn't wait to go do it. We're going to kick the Taliban's ass. They're a bunch of jerks. They need to get put in their place. And then when you come home and you realize it didn't matter, it is devastating. And to not have a support network, or to not have a place to vent. And I can see it in the comments that just folks, they're at their wits' end. They don't know who to talk to. You can talk to a therapist, but again, you show up for one session maybe every 2 weeks. Yeah. Is that really going to get to the heart of the issue? I don't think so. I think it's part of the solution, but not the whole solution. I'm not saying I have all the solutions, but what we're doing here, listening to folks that have been through it, you've had your experiences, I've had mine. And to know that you're not alone, but you need to find a way to build a community. I think that's a really powerful message, because if you're not heard and you feel like nothing's ever going to change, I think that's just the surefire way, because I've been there. I've been angry, not knowing how to like get this like anger monkey off my back, to the point now where I feel good. I can have these conversations. And what you just said there didn't anger me. Yeah. It was just an interesting point. So I want to change gears. Because you practice what you preach. You're fit. It's not like you got black belt in jiu-jitsu, and then all of a sudden you're like 70 pounds overweight and like not taking care of yourself. You're an ultra marathon runner, which I think is amazing. It's also cuckoo bananas for me, like having done marathons. I think anything more than a marathon is a bit much, but it's amazing. That being said, this is a question that my wife actually challenged me on a few years ago, because as you know, I've done the Ironman, I've done marathons. I like doing hard things. But I went to go do this extra thing that was not out of character, but it was a little bit much. It was like a Navy SEAL, like beasting, right? And the day before I'm about to go, and the reason why I was doing it is because I felt in order to get back to baseline, my wife and I had split. I was like, the only way I can like recenter myself is through pain and misery.
Right.
I saw it. I'm like, that's what I have to do to center myself.
Mm-hmm.
But during that process, something changed, mainly psychedelics, not going to lie. And me and my wife got back together, and I still had this thing that I was committed to. She's like, are you doing this because you want people to think that you're tough and that you can do hard things? Because everybody thinks that, I think that, or are you really actually doing it for yourself? And I went, oh shit. And the guy, I knew the answer. I'm not doing this for me at all.
Oh, okay.
I'm doing this for everybody else. So you're an ultra marathon runner. I'll send the question to you. Is this for you?
That's a great question. Great question by your wife.
Yeah, he rocked me.
And you had the courage to give the honest answer.
Yeah, he rocked me.
Yeah, what's really interesting about this is to the outside world, whether someone's doing it from external or internal reasons, you can't tell.
Mm-hmm.
So I did some marathon running in my kind of late 20s, and that was part of getting ready to become a cop. I thought, that would look good on a resume too. And I really like the idea of being a marathon runner. Like, it sounds badass, right? It's like, and so I trained and I ran a couple. I even ran one blindfolded.
Wow.
Yeah, my buddy was beside me, held his elbow, raised some money for a charity. And again, that was all, some of it was for the resume, but some of it was because I thought it would look cool and people would think I was a badass. So there was a lot of external there. I mean, there's benefits in running, so I got that. But the engine that was driving that was a sense of, I need to do more, or I'm not enough, or I can, and I wanted to maybe prove something to someone or something outside myself that I was awesome. What's interesting now, since I took back up running again in my late 40s, is to the external observer, behavior is the same. Well, actually, even maybe crazier now. But the internal drive is completely different. Like, other than my kids seeing me as an athlete, I zero care about anybody seeing me as a runner. It's completely self-driven and self-motivated. I want to be a good example for my kids because they don't listen to us, but they copy us. Mm-hmm. But my main motivation for running and trail running is I don't like running very much, actually. Like, sometimes you have a good run where it feels good, but 90% of runs, if you're like me, the first 4K are brutal, and then you just get in a rhythm and then you're sore by the end. I don't like running all that much. Running in the woods on trails, I love. It's become a passion. I love being in the woods. That's my main motivation now. And I just use the ultras as a fun icing on the cake after a period of training where I've progressed and hit some new milestones. The race day is about just showing up and celebrating and being part of their trail community, which is incredibly supportive and beautiful, full of exceptional individuals, and taking some of my kids or my wife there with me to kind of celebrate it. But that's the icing on the cake. The cake for me is being in the woods, covering ground on my feet, long distances, which I believe, I think I can make a pretty good argument for this, is what we were designed and how we've evolved to be for the first, I don't know what time period we want to go on here. It depends on which scientist list. 200,000 years as human Homo sapien. I don't know, 2 million. As long as we, but for majority of that time frame, we were covering distances and outside doing a lot of work from sunrise to sunset. And we've gotten out of alignment with that. And I choose, a big part of the meaning I give to running on trails in the forest is this feeling of coming back in alignment. Like, our superpower over the animals, other than our brain, is our ability to jog slowly for long periods of time. We used to hunt that way.
Right.
Chase the antelope, chase the impala. They run away quickly. We keep jogging slowly towards it. After 4 hours, it's on the ground panting. It can't move, and we kill it. I mean, that's literally one of the tactics we use. We are kind of built to do that. And so for me, I just choose to give it that meaning. I feel a sense of alignment, being in the woods, in nature, by myself, no earbuds, ever. listening, being present, covering ground. That's what it's about for me.
Wow. I think they call that naked running now, where
Is
you
it?
have no tech.
Oh, cool. Now I got a cool name to
You're
give
not
it.
literally like you get confused really fast. Like
Yeah.
I run naked. Like, what do you do? Oh, that's
Thanks for clarifying, because I would have taken that literally and could have scared some hikers.
Oh, jeez. But I like that whole idea that like you just fundamentally enjoy, and you go into nature too. That one thing that I do enjoy running. Don't get me wrong, but only running around in like the suburbs gets a bit tiring.
Yeah.
Like it's not as enjoyable, and so you have to kind of drive out because I live in the city. I don't live in the country, but when you don't run without earbuds, you get that inner monologue, right?
Yeah.
And that's where honestly, the reason why this podcast exists was because of a run.
Really?
Yeah, man. I just got fired from, I was in the middle of it. I didn't realize I was in the middle of it, right? And my protocol is usually if something bad happens or something unpredictable, my protocol is usually go for like a 10K.
Nice.
No headphones, nothing. And for some reason, this term hard to kill kept on popping up because I'd never really been fired in my life. I was a teacher, I was in the military, and then I took this job in tech, which was outside my comfort zone. But I was trying to find something because I was in complete disarray psychologically and even physically at that time. And it just kept on popping up. Hard to kill, hard to kill. Dave, you're hard to kill. Like my subconscious was saying, like, you're going to get through this.
Yeah.
I was like, I wonder why I keep on thinking this one sentence, you're hard to kill. And then I just said, well, you know what? I've been listening to podcasts. Maybe I'll just give this a try. And then that's how it started. I came up with this philosophy on, hey, let's be resilient. Things can happen, but you can build back better type thing. I don't mean to use a WEF term, but it's pretty catchy. But that was it, man. And it's all due to running. If I need to think, running and swimming, I don't know if you're a swimmer. I love getting in the water. Actually, I get in the water here, just in the river. That's where I did it. That's where I did my Ironman. Actually, I had no choice.
Amazing.
Yeah, I just swim in the basin here, and that to me is like the most meditative practice I do is either running or swimming because sometimes it's an hour and just me.
So that's really interesting, and I'm not sure if you've ever seen or partaken with your therapist in EMDR. EMDR is considered, one of the sort of gold standards for treatment of trauma, traumatic memories. And it was discovered by a woman who was walking in the woods, who noticed as she was thinking about something traumatic that had happened to her, her eyes are tracking back and forth in the woods as you do on a trail. And by the time she got done her walk, she noticed that the emotional sort of intensity of what she was thinking about had gone down. That's how it started. A walk in the woods, tracking back and forth with her eyes. So there's something to be said for just being in the woods or swimming, looking back and forth, that bilateral stimulation. And yeah, having a run as the go-to to kind of resolve problems and think about things is important. I do want to mention one other thing about the ultramarathon running, because I don't want to just sit here with you talking about me like I'm, I fail at most of my ultramarathons. And it's intentional. First ultramarathon I ever did, I was an idiot who didn't know what he didn't know in 2019. And I said, I'm this really strong, mentally tough guy, and I've been an athlete my whole life. I'm going to run a 100-mile race. Halliburton Forest, April 1st, I'm going to start running again. I was 210 pounds. I registered for the Halliburton 100-miler, gave myself 5 months to train. I got this. And I failed. It was a two lap of 50 miles through the woods, and I did 1 lap. I sprained my ankle 30K in and then managed to finish 50 miles, but I failed. And then the next one, I think it was I might have gone back for the 50-mile Halliburton and failed. And then I did the 100K Lost Soul out in Alberta to qualify for Western States. That was my goal. And I made it 65K and started throwing up and couldn't get back on track. And I failed and I failed and I failed. Now I've crossed the line on a few now and done really well. But the big point is, again, this speaks to my intention about why I do it. It's not about the finish line. It's not even about finishing, although that's the goal, of course. But somebody asked me in one of the ones I didn't finish, DNF'd at, about how frustrated or mad I was. And I gave the most sincere, honest answer was, I didn't care at all. It was in the attempt. I learned that for me in my own life, I love failing forward.
Mm.
There's something about setting something so big just for me to stretch towards, to become more as I move towards something. Whether you get there, if you failed, it's almost an indication of movement, not of lack of anything. This failure aversion we have in our culture, like it's a dirty word, is perplexing to me when you really think about it. It's like anybody you know who has had success in any element of their life, business, fitness, relationship, if you know their whole story, not just what you see in the moment in public, if you could see their private journey littered with failures, setbacks, whatever. So when we know that's true, why do we have this aversion to saying that we failed at something? And when it comes to ultramarathon running, I'll surmise what I was saying there is I have failed way more ultras than I've finished. It's not about the finish line anyways.
Well, realistically, nobody really fails. You just learn. It's an education.
Love it. Yeah.
I mean, that's from my teacher background, and the culture around failing is awful. You constantly have these kids petrified of failing.
Yeah.
It's like, kid, man, the more you fail, especially at 12, 14, 16, accumulate a shit ton of failures, because all that's going to do is just point you in a better direction. And if you suck at math and you keep on failing at math, cool. You know, why are you failing at math? Okay. Is it that big of a deal? You'll figure it out eventually.
Yeah.
You just haven't got it yet. And unfortunately, a lot of the conversation is so focused on those failures, and rather than like, hey, but afterwards they did it right. Hey, look what they do now. It's seeing the forest for the trees. And I really like that you clarified that. Yeah, man, like you're not crushing 100 miles. Oh my God. That's 4 marathons, man. That's insane.
That would have been insane. But I didn't cover that distance. I only covered 50 miles. So,
but it's true though. Unless you set an ambitious goal, it's going to be very hard for you to stretch. And you talked about comfort zones and the boundless, amount of opportunity past that wall. I think that was a great place to kind of summarize what we've been talking about here. But I do have one last question, and I did some deep intel work on you, just by the way. So, if you had a chance to sit down with Dr. Phil, what would you ask him?
Dr. Phil, is he the guy that has a talk show?
Yeah, he has a pretty big talk show. Apparently, you watch it from time to time. Yeah.
Okay, so obviously you've spoken to somebody. This is my, as they call it, guilty pleasure. I love watching Dr. Phil. Please don't judge me who's watching that. I think what I like about Dr. Phil is it's basically Jerry Springer, but with kind of a elevated verbiage and with someone who's got, who's a doctor.
Right.
So I think I can watch it and get the same little, entertainment as if I'm watching Jerry Springer, but I can still feel whole with myself that I'm not.
Hal, you don't need to justify it. It's okay. We just
feel like I do.
No, it's totally fine. I love it too, man. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah.
The nice thing about Dr. Phil, and now I'm defending Dr. Phil for those of you that judge him, is I've never heard him say, well, maybe not never. Most of the 99% of the time, his advice is good advice, but it's generally obvious, common sense advice. And, a line to steal from him is, common sense isn't that common anymore. So I think that's why I like Dr. Phil.
That's great, man. Yeah. Well, Hal, man, this has been a real hoot. I was super nervous about all of this shit.
Yeah.
And you really put my feelings at ease. So I really appreciate that, man. And the conversation we just had, whether somebody's paid attention to your work before or listened to one of our episodes before, it's irrelevant. You can't hear this message enough. It needs to be hammered home. Like, you can get better. I say you're not broken. You're just under recovered. And I think he did a great job of putting that in a really good contextual framework that there's always a way forward, man. Like, you can figure this out. It's going to suck. It's going to be hard, but appreciate it that you can actually do it. So before we sign off, do you have something you want to share with the folks that are listening? How do folks get a hold of you, and where can they learn more about you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm easy to find. If you just Google Hal Hughes, you're gonna find me pretty easy. So, yeah, if I was gonna have the opportunity to say one more thing, it would be sincerely thanking you for your service.
Thanks. And I would say the exact same thing to you. Thanks for your service, man. You're doing great work. I do have something. I have a call to action. We're going to be talking on June 28th.
Yes.
So it's a hot dad conference, right? So we're going to be talking about men's health in Pointe Claire here in Montreal. And you, myself, and Ryan Carey are going to be talking about men's health issues. You're going to be talking about mental health, of course. And we're going to be having that discussion on the 28th at Indigo Books in Pointe Claire. And thanks so much for deciding to be a part of this, man. It's going to be a really cool day.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for having me today and for inviting me onto that. It's going to be a great panel.
Right on. Right, folks. So thanks for tuning in. Don't forget, train hard, fight easy, and see you on the next one. Peace.